All right. All right. So how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on.
Doing well. Glad to have you on. So I was just telling everyone, I'm pretty sure you and I are at opposite ends of the political spectrum, but I think we still do have a lot of, I think our ethics are the same. And I think a lot of our beliefs actually are the same. I just think we believe in different paths to achieve it. And I think it's always a good idea to have people with differing opinions offer their contribution because you probably do know a lot of things that I don't. And it can always enrich me, my followers.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't think we're on radical ends of the spectrum, though. I'm moderate. And if your political spectrum was to cross, I'm just a little bit right of the bullseye, just a little bit. I encourage people to take a political spectrum quiz. I do it about once every 4 years or so. I side with, I try to answer at least 100 to 150 questions because most people, I think, are getting trapped into the main 10 things that the news is talking about at the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing. It's just so, to me, it's very, I guess it's sad. It's sad when science or facts become a political discussion. Evolution shouldn't be a political discussion, or the effectiveness of vaccines overall. That shouldn't be a political discussion. I mean, there's clear data suggesting the efficacy of vaccines. They're not perfect. Perfect example, one of my friends, his nephew was one of the, I don't know, a tenth of a percent of people who suffered adverse effects from the polio vaccine. He's a quadriplegic. So the thing is, the polio vaccine has saved millions of lives. It has saved millions of lives. It has saved tens of millions of people from being severely debilitated.
Mhm.
But because vaccines are not 100% effective, there's always that chance. And I always get scared whenever I give my kids they were getting the MMR and all of these other vaccinations because, oh God, please don't let us be that 0.001%.
Agreed.
So, like I said, I just think facts shouldn't be a political thing. What were you going to say?
I agree with your sentiment there. It's a little bit sad and regrettable. And I wish I sent you a message. I said, I wish we would return to the days where we would see a little bit more pragmatic of a discussion between people on a little bit opposite ends of the spectrum, Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley. That conversation back then got derailed too, because they both ended up almost getting in a fight. But everything has been getting more and more politically polarizing, and they're trying to politicize every little issue. And a lot of it's not a political issue.
I agree. I yeah, it's something that gets clicks and it's something that helps divide us as a people. And when we're a divided people, we are very easy to exploit. And
Yeah.
my fear is that because we are so divided now, we have not been this easy to exploit in decades. I mean, perfect example, we have a tremendous amount of debt,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Like, well, there's something happened in 2018 that made our debt skyrocket, even past the Trump administration, during the Biden administration, and now during this Trump administration. The corporate tax rate was cut by 14%.
Mm,
Our federal revenue is, let's say, 4.5 trillion a year, but our expenditures have consistently been between that 5 to 6 trillion. And
yeah.
that what happens is, okay, when you cut taxes and there's no other source of revenue for the federal government, we run into a deficit. The
Right.
largest deficit we ever ran into was in 2020, 2021. And even though the deficit didn't grow as quickly, it's been higher. It's been at a higher rate than it has in the past 60, 70, since World War II,
Yeah.
because you literally just we cut off one of our arms, but we're still trying to play basketball. And that's a problem. And that is something I think we're just unfortunately going to see more of. And now there's a proposal, it just passed the House, that the debt ceiling is going to be raised by another $4 trillion.
Right. Yeah. And I commented on that on a post recently as well, saying because a lot of people I think on both sides are trying to speculate that Trump with the Doge and everything else that is actually going to decrease military spending or the military budget. And I said, no, that's absolutely positively not going to happen. I can tell you that right now. And I think there's been news that came out recently that said it's going to actually increase by about another 50 billion. So we're going to be well over 900 billion annually. The defense budget is something that's never going to
Will
lower,
never get touched.
except from about 93 to about 97 in the post Soviet collapse of 91 that created the peace dividend. Then there were a few years then where we had a lower budget defense wise, lower military personnel. And I
Yes.
think 1997, one of the CIA directors, I can't remember who it was, but he released for the first time part of the intelligence budget. There's still the secret, the black budget, but he released the budget back in 97, I think, that said the intelligence community budget was, I think, 25 or 27 billion, which doesn't seem much compared to the military budget, but you have to consider that they're not doing huge procurement of research and development with Raytheon and Lockheed and things like that on building tanks and aircraft carriers and things like that. They got 25 to 27 billion just for their personnel and SIG and human
Yeah.
counterintelligence operations.
I'm friends with someone who was in the army for 30 years, and he spent about 20 of those years doing black ops. And he said that wherever he would ship, he'd have his team. They would literally just go into a giant room full of $100 bills
Mhm.
and just fill duffel bags and be like,
Yeah.
okay, this is who we need this for bribes. We're going to do this. We're going to infiltrate this. It was just, and I was always, did you ever get to sneak a bag home? And he was, we didn't even take an extra $100 bill. I was, wow.
That's crazy. There's actually more US $100 bills outside of America than there are inside of America. And I don't know if we're doing it anymore. I think they're trying to put it more into military aid packages that is the actual supplies and logistics and such
Yeah.
versus sending an airplane full of pallets of $100 bills, which was what they were doing. They flew it into Libya in about 2010 or so for the Arab Spring. They've done it in other places. They used to fly it into Iraq and pay off the Anbar Awakening and the Sons of Iraq and all that kind of stuff. There's no telling how many supposed Iraqi soldiers that were not necessarily on our side, but basically being paid off to not join a
Yeah.
jihadist group that weren't even, they were ghost soldiers. And Paul Bremer, who was the first ambassador and started the process there in Iraq, he lost something 12 to $18 billion. They just can't account for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. That's just, all right, just sell out somewhere. I mean, I wonder, how much does $18 billion weigh? I'm guessing it probably weighs, let's say, 4 tons. What do you think? No, maybe 10 tons.
I would have to have had probably 10, closer to 10. It's going to be probably several pallets. That's $18 billion on the high end.
Well, a pallet of hundreds is how much money?
Pallet of hundreds. Let me look that up. How much is a pallet of hundreds? I'm wondering how many actual bills there are and how much it weighs and how much it depends on how many bills are stacked on it. So AI is saying if it's a single US $100 bill and they're stacked, a stack of 100 would be almost half an inch thick, which would be $10,000. A brick of 10 stacks would be just over 4 inches, $100,000. A strap of 10,000, which would be 10 bricks, would be 1 million. Holy cats. So it would be a 4 foot high stack. It would be a 4 foot high
Okay.
stack for 1 billion.
Oh, that's it? A four
That's
foot high stack for $1 billion?
it's a pallet. It's a pallet that's
Oh, a
stacked.
4 foot high pallet.
Okay,
Okay.
so it'd be one 10 bundle, 100 straps, 10 stacks of 100 million at 4 foot high would be 1 billion.
Wow. Okay, so 10 stacks at 4 feet high.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. All right. That's
That's
so
probably,
that's
and that's probably a small pallet. because I think well, I guess a pallet would be what 10 stacks. I think that'd be half a pallet, maybe. It's hard to picture
Half a pallet for a billion?
because these pallets that I've seen pictures of were pallets that are at least twice the size of what AI is generating here.
Okay, so maybe 2 pallets, maybe for 18 billion, maybe 3 pallets?
Yeah, something around
I
there. Yeah, for
thought it would be more.
3 full pallets. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so glad we got that out of the way. Now, my question to you is, let's say there are 2, because you believe that actually, no, let me fix that up. Do you think Trump voting alongside with North Korea, not Trump, but America voting alongside with North Korea was the right step for us to take?
Well, I mean, I think you might have had it right more the first time. I don't know if it's America or Trump influencing America to vote that way. It's a little bit strange that on any issue whatsoever, unless it's humanitarian, which this partially is, that the US would vote on the side of the likes of North Korea.
And
Others,
Russia and Venezuela?
yeah, and even China abstaining and such. And as Preston Stew and others pointed out, the US could have just not even voted or anything, right?
So do you think that's the right course of action?
Well, I don't think it sets the right precedent or tone or anything, especially from a perspective of American diplomacy. I think we want to project an image of I, this is what my opinion is. I think, especially with Trump in office, we want to project an image of our dominance. And if Trump wants peace over there, I think he wants to influence his whole administration to follow a line of being upright, forthright, above board for humanitarian purposes, for humanitarian causes and justice. And I think it wasn't the right call for that. Even abstaining wouldn't have been, I don't think. I think US would want to say, especially in lines with what Trump is saying, and like I said before, I lean right, but I take a realist approach. I think he would want to say, tell Putin, don't tell Zelensky. If you want to project an image of strength, tell Putin, hey, this is where you draw the line. This is how we're going to vote this time. And I want peace there quickly. And I'm not going to collaborate with you as much and may not collaborate with Zelensky as much. That's fine. But I think he should want to send a stronger message to Putin because I don't think Putin is in as good of a position to negotiate.
He isn't. All right.
No.
Now, do you think Trump saying that Ukraine started this war is the right course of action?
Well, yeah, those things that and the 4%, nobody even knows where he came up with that. Even
So,
people,
yeah, there you go. So, do you agree that's made us weaker? Do you think that what Trump is currently doing with this conflict, do you think that's making us weaker? Is it alienating us from our allies?
I think so. And I think this is just a realistic approach. Doesn't matter what your politic is. When a US president makes statements that on the world stage that are that much misinformation, if it was Joe Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, anybody else, and they were a little bit misinformed, that can be forgiven because there's two types of mistakes. There's the mistakes of the mind, common everyday mistake. Everybody makes them. So slap on the wrist, bad cop, no donut. Everybody can get over it because everybody knows they make them. But the other mistake is there's mistakes of the heart. That's when you do something that you know is wrong, but you do it anyway. And when we're talking about American foreign policy and diplomacy and projecting our might and strength, it has to be virtuous and with integrity at the highest level. And even best case scenario, if Trump says he was misinformed, spitting out those things that he did, it I think it diminishes America's international political economy from a perspective of democratic values and such.
Do you think that just with this past month, do you still think Trump was the right choice to lead us?
Well, I'm working on a big paper in my master's course that is going to address my perspective of how elites basically engineered geopolitics and socioeconomics. And to
Sure.
answer your question, I think he was based on the options that we have. I think he's going to be an agent for change. I think there's some positive changes coming out of it, but it was such a whack. It was such a whack election. The whole election was so crazy. At the end of the Biden term, you have, as Trump is coming in, he's pardoning all of J6. As Biden is going out, he's preemptively pardoning his whole family and all this other stuff. And this goes to my theory about the elites basically engineering things this because most of our US presidents since World War II, except maybe Carter and Ford, have pretty strong links to mafia and pretty strong links to transnational elite. Trump says he's going to drain the swamp. Trump is a billionaire.
Trump
Trump
is the
is
swamp.
Trump is part of the swamp.
He is, yeah, exactly. Trump is one of the big, I mean, again, this isn't personal. I'm not, this isn't because I dislike the man. This is, he made a series of mistakes in his previous administration,
Right?
and he made it very clear what he was going to do if elected. And now he's following through on that. And I think it's just, from the information I have, it's making us weaker. It's going to take a lot of money out of our economy because we get between what, 4 to $600 billion every single year in foreign direct investment from the other NATO countries. A lot of that's with weapons. They purchase a lot of our land. They bring a lot of money here. We have favorable trade deals with them. We have favorable trade deals with all these other countries. And from every angle I look at it, our current president's policies are going to benefit the very wealthy. They are
Yes.
going to benefit the swamps.
I think that
And go
go
ahead.
ahead. Okay.
No, I want you to, I talk.
I talk a lot too. We had a great discussion last time with Dr. K too. I think we slightly touched upon these things. All right. I was able to segue in my thought on, I'm seeing all this shift almost globally a little bit more towards the conservative right and more towards realism or the international system being a little bit more anarchical, as I put it. And John Mearsheimer and Hedley Bull and others put it as the anarchical society. And what my paper is focusing on, the research question or problem is order out of chaos, how transnational elites engineer global geopolitics and socioeconomics. And I have about 30 scenarios outlined so far that I'm still pulling some sources on. But the overall theme is that it's not a conspiracy theory type situation. It's historic, and it doesn't happen all the time. And it's not as if there's one unified Illuminati. That would be conspiracy theory. But even if it's a natural disaster or a pandemic, there are trends, patterns, and typologies that we can see. And you can pull the financial type data and see the charts and stuff. And you can see where almost all of those, even if they didn't intend for it to happen, once it did happen, the elites basically started engineering it mostly to consolidate their power, to shift
Sure.
geopolitics in whatever favor they want, or for basic financial gain.
So, and you think that's what's happening now?
Well, I'm coupling that with I think it was Mother Jones had a full magazine titled The American Oligarchy that pointed out that we have 25% of the world's billionaires have a primary residence in the US and about 35% of the world's multimillionaires. Yeah. So America is more of a hegemon than anybody else. If you have somebody, especially Elon Musk, that is in the mix there and Trump won the election, and it always seems it's really close. It's almost 50-50. It's 48 to 52 or something like that. There's a lot of indicators to me that for whatever reasons, somebody somewhere else is rigging this an Italian football or soccer match almost. So my question is, why? How are they doing it? Let's look at the mechanisms of how they're doing it and why. And now that Trump is in office, what are the most likely courses of actions and outcomes that we can from predictive analysis? Where are we
But
going
it's
now?
in our face. It's in our face as to why. It's in our face. Tax cuts for the wealthy. You orchestrate certain emergencies, so we print more money and inflation goes up. But the very wealthy, the 1%, they have so much more money that it easily will outpace inflation because they're holding on to the assets that they were able to buy for pennies to the dollar for dirt cheap with the free money. So that's to me, that's just very clear. It's just, and it's more of a disparity of wealth. The very wealthy, the 1% or the 2% get so much more power, not just over the poor, over the middle class, because it's the middle class that really changes things. But I wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I agree with Musk and Trump. They're planning to literally not drain the swamp. They're trying to drain whatever life is in the swamp. Would that have happened under a Harris administration? Would we have seen such a blatant assault on the financial fabric of this country? And would we see a deterioration of our strategic standing and an alienation of our allies?
I think if Harris was to get into office, it did greatly depend on who she would have in her administration and what the previous Biden administration and that national security strategy and economic strategy and all that was. She had what she said was going to be her economic strategy was going to be basically an extension of Biden's, I think.
Yes.
She would have still sided with Israel, for example. I think
Yes.
she would have much more strongly sided super pro NATO and Ukraine.
Of
I'm
course.
and to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure where Trump is going with this, with some of his rhetoric. I think that this is one of the things that I'm wondering. To answer your question, I think partially no. She wouldn't have had also the same border security and migration reform strategy down south. I don't know what she would have done down south. Last time she
But
$40 billion to Guatemala, right?
with her strategy, well, I don't know. I won't even call it her strategy because it was a Republican. It was Langford in Nebraska who passed the border bill that would have attacked a lot of the issues that we had to face.
Right.
And again, we know who it was who forced the GOP to shoot down that bill. And
Yeah.
so I think with the border under a Harris administration, that bill would have passed.
And what all was this is something that I've talked to some retired Homeland Security and ICE type agents about. They've said that they have the personnel and the equipment to implement certain things and they think would have certain successes if they basically just had the green light. So who, when, how, where, why was that green light basically never given to them? I think is one of my questions. That's just a
What do you
what
mean by the green light? Because and the bill wasn't just about adding a few thousand staff, but the bill was primarily about shutting down the border once there are 4,000 encounters. Once there are 4,000 encounters, the border's shut down. Doesn't matter how many people are lining up, the border's closed.
right.
Which at least to have allowed that, I think would have been a very good idea.
Yeah.
But that was shut down, even though the GOP was saying that this was a crisis, that every day the border was just left open because it was an emergency. And the bill to solve the problem was shot down.
And so they perpetuated somebody. I'm not familiar with the bill as much. So we're looking at another scenario where chaos was managed.
Yes. Well, the goal was to not give the Democrats a win. It
Ah,
was during an election year. It was, it was in 2020, 2024, or the beginning of 2024. It was during an election year. They
okay.
could not let the Democrats have a win.
Okay. And it was a Republican bill.
Yes. It was,
That's
I didn't want to say it, but it was Trump who literally spoke to the GOP heads and said, no, you can't do that. You cannot give them this win.
well, it's maybe possibly part of almost an October surprise because the
What's an
whole
October surprise?
well, back in the Reagan era days when there's still the hostage crisis in Iran, basically there's a lot of people that There's like a lot of good evidences that suggest that the hostages remained in Iran just long enough for
Yes.
Reagan to come in.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right.
So again, I mean, we've just listed two low life dirtbag strategies from the GOP. I would like to hear a low life dirtbag strategy from the Democrats. Really, I really want to hear something so horrendously insidious. And I'm looking. I can't find anything about the Democrats. It's crazy psycho conspiracy theories. You have to suspend your common sense to believe some of the crap of the whole. I don't want to say it's the P word and all that, and or Biden took showers with his daughter. All this horrible crap, and all of it is easily dispelled. So I want to know what blatant, horrendous things happened as a that was pushed by the liberals, that was pushed by liberals in office, either as president or in Congress.
Are you talking about at the congressional bill level?
Anything comparable to what we just discussed.
Okay. Well, I'm not at once. Let's go back to Obama era. I'm not quite
Go
sure
for it.
if he was Democrat, liberal, what kind of agendas he was pushing, but for by and large, it seemed the Obama administration was almost an extension of the Bush administration, even though he was billed as Democrat, right? Because he actually expanded the drone war, right?
Expanded the drone war, was the deporter in chief. Gun sales skyrocketed under Obama. And I think we were bombing someone else every single, the drone wars. Yeah. So, were you serving under Obama?
I served under George Bush Sr., Clinton, George Bush Jr., or kind of a junior, I guess you could say. And I got out in 2012. So I served under Obama a little bit. I served either military or law enforcement through all those guys.
Now, which president did you serve under? Did you feel, which president did you serve under? Did you feel, wow, this guy really has our back?
Well, my thoughts and attitudes have changed a little bit over the years because when I first got back from Desert Storm, I said George W. Bush is just going to beat this Arkansas guy's butt, and he's our man. I thought he was supporting the troops and everything, and I'm not quite sure what was going on with him, but and I was watching Bill Clinton play the saxophone on Arsenio Hall, and I was, how is this guy so gaining so much popularity? And then George Bush said those three words, "Read my lips."
Yeah.
6 words really, "No new taxes."
Yeah.
And then out and George Bush's popularity post Desert Storm was super high. And the next thing was crashed. And I was, wow, what happened? But as far as having the backs of the American people in total and overall,
Mhm.
man, talking about those types of people at echelons above reality, it's hard to understand what their true motives and mentality were because I can actually see people trying to argue that George W. Bush might have been that. I would struggle to find a person. And I think Clinton squandered a great amount of opportunity with the economy there too. I'm not quite sure what happened. I think they tried to engineer chaos there. The, as we mentioned before, the military budget, the intelligence budget went down. Those guys needed a job justification and billability. The next thing you know, Clinton missed a couple of opportunities getting, but next thing, a fabulous disaster, 9/11. I think Bill Clinton had a good heart overall.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that. So just it's because I was under that impression too that Bill Clinton actually was really the most well-meaning of the last four or five that we've had. He brought about actual change. I mean, he balanced the budget. He cut everywhere. He didn't just cut. I think we he cut some defense spending, but he also cut a lot of social spending. And it's interesting to hear you say that. Now, when you were saying how Obama was kind of almost an extension of the George Bush administration, do you think George Bush Jr., do you think he would have offered more support to Ukraine if Russia invaded?
George Bush Sr.,
Yeah. Or Junior? Senior, absolutely. Senior would have been, let's see some blood. No, Junior.
I think so. I don't know. He's one of those minds. It's hard to understand all of his thoughts and motivations and everything. But especially if he picked up on the rare earth minerals
Yeah.
and the fragility of the whole stability of the region and everything, I think he would have. I could see George Bush Jr. getting together with Scooter Libby and saying, "Hey, manipulate some intelligence, even if you've got out a CIA agent." The
Yeah.
whole Valerie Plame thing, and let's get into Ukraine. And who knows? To be honest with you, these guys, from what I've seen, it's maybe not necessarily the president as much, but there's people in, say, the Trilateral Commission and the National Security Council and such that some of their generals, what they do in West Point and beyond is
Yeah.
plan for wars. Any scenario, anywhere in the world you can imagine. It's a lot of socioeconomics and geopolitics. So I can't rule it out that this whole Ukraine thing might not have been on a back burner even during George Bush's time. And say there's a presidential game plan or book. They might have had some kind of contingency to go into Ukraine or meddle with Ukraine or the whole situation for some time. So maybe it was partially part of either George W. Bush's idea or ideas of his National Security Council at that time.
Do you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe my question just escaped my mind. Do you think that the United States orchestrated the Maidan revolution that ousted the pro-Russia president in Ukraine?
Well, I think there was some type of U.S. covert operations going on there. I think there was manipulation of social media and other things going on there, right?
Do you think the US orchestrated the like the dozens of thousands of Ukrainians protesting outside for months in the cold? Do you think that was US involvement,
I
or
think,
was it just the Ukrainian thing enough?
well, that's a little bit complex because I'm still reading into things that the U.S. definitely has influence operations. So to say, did the U.S. orchestrate it or were they architects of it or whatever? That's a
Were
stretch.
they architects? Just a simple, yeah, it's a stretch. I think the
Yeah.
answer is no.
No, not
I think the Ukrainian people were infuriated. They had enough, and the US said, let's help them.
right.
That's
Well,
that's different than covert misinformation. It's you didn't need to spread misinformation to Ukraine to see that Russia was extending its tentacles to gobble them up again, if not militarily, then politically.
I can follow along with that a little bit because I can also couple that with Russian historical continuity after their collapse.
Yeah.
Probably
They
been
seized Moldova, yeah, Moldova, and then Georgia.
right. They always wanted to try to regain the old
Yes,
Soviet empire, geographically and politically at least, and be that hegemon in the region and maybe even go back to the Cold War and be a competitor with the US. So there's the Russian historical continuity perspective, and Putin is, I think Yeltsin failed a little bit when he went into Chechnya the first time. It wasn't seen by the Russian oligarchy and shadow government as much. And former KGB Putin comes in and he's their hardball player. And by the way, if there's a dictator, people are saying, oh, he's only got 4% approval in Ukraine. Zelensky's a dictator. If there's a dictator in the region, it's probably Putin. He's been in for over 20 years, right?
yeah.
He went in to Chechnya the second time after supposedly Yeltsin's soft approach, and they wiped out even more people. Um,
No,
so
I want to go back to because the thing is, what I keep hearing on the further right side of the spectrum is that Russia invaded out of self defense. That Russia seized Crimea because of the Maidan Revolution, which was orchestrated by NATO and the United States. Now, do you think that's a valid claim?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you think it's a valid claim that Russia seized Crimea because of NATO and America's interference with the Maidan Revolution?
No, I think what they did is they used it as an excuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they used it as an excuse and it held no water because no matter what the US tries to incentivize, the US cannot make almost 100,000 people sit out for months in the cold to, in protest of a brutal government. That's not something America can do.
Well,
And there's Go ahead.
Russia. The
Really? Okay,
CIA,
give me an example.
the CIA has funds to basically arm, equip, and pay armies of up to 50,000 plus in multiple countries at the same time.
Were
Now
these
that's,
army?
yeah,
Was this a Ukrainian army?
yeah,
Were these people bribed?
right. That's more militarily,
Yes.
but on the covert propaganda side, it's covert for a reason. You don't know where the influence is coming. How they get out there and do that, do the things they do, there's probably a variety of different motives. Did US, yeah, are they the sole architect or orchestrator of it? No. Was there
The
much?
main architect, not the
Right.
sole architect. Was the US the main architect of it, or was it the Ukrainian people who constantly had their voices shut down by pro-Russia, by a pro-Russian government, aided by the Russian government and the Russian military?
I haven't examined this as much. Ukraine, Russia is not my area of
Yeah.
operation specialty. However, not the main. They're not the main. I would say the Ukrainians are the main factor. However,
They are self-sovereign. I think the Ukraine, sorry, not the Ukraine. Ukraine is self-sovereign when it came to getting rid of Yanukovych, and they don't deserve to be robbed of that sovereignty for political purposes.
right. And I think that's something that the Trump administration needs to, and I wouldn't be surprised if they actually shift or pivot a little bit away from Putin, because I think Trump is provocative and unpredictable. What he's
Yes.
well, the other day, the news was saying, okay, well, he's met with Putin and they're talking about Ukraine, and Ukraine isn't even at the table. Well,
Yes.
now news is saying that he's actually talking with Zelensky now, but it's focusing on what their discussion is regarding Ukraine's rare minerals. That's
Yes.
what that is. Um, but I don't think people can discount or diminish much from the powerful effects of psyop and influence operations. Is it the main thing that motivated the Ukrainians? Probably not. Did the US have psyop going on in Ukraine? Absolutely.
Sure. Well, yeah, the US has PSYOP operations going on everywhere. Russia had PSYOP operations in Ukraine. They probably have PSYOP operations in Germany, England, France, especially East Germany. East Germany is a huge Russian PSYOP center for the sheer fact that Russia had such infrastructure in East Germany for what, 50 years? And of course, Russia throws in a lot of PSYOPs in the United States. So it's not America was doing anything extra. That's just my opinion. But it's not like America was, wow, no, by all means, Ukraine must do this. It's just you read the transcripts with, it wasn't the Secretary of State, but it was deputy secretaries, and in none of the transcripts was it, we have to make this happen. We have to bribe this and do that. It was more, hey, this is happening. Okay, let's make the most of it, and that's fine. The opportunity presented itself, kind of like you said. If they don't orchestrate it, but something happens, okay, let's go in. Let's see.
Well, going to all this, that's another area where I regret to see Americans get too politically polarized, because one of my main things is I'm an American. I'm a veteran of the military. I'm not Russian or Ukrainian. I don't speak either language. I haven't been to either country yet. I'll go to both. And I am not as familiar as I should be with the whole area of operation, despite being in military intelligence so long. My area of operation was the Middle East. I speak Arabic, etc. However, what I'll say is that I've told people, if you are not boots on the ground or BOG, you don't
Yeah.
really fully understand exactly what's going on in different regions. Because let's say in Donbass and Donetsk and Luhansk, there are areas that are reportedly leaning towards Russia. There are areas that are reportedly leaning towards Ukraine. I've been told by people that are still in that they're anticipating that Ukraine is possibly going to come to the table and sign a peace deal, even if it means ceding some of their territory. And I don't think that's exactly the best message that America or NATO
Of
should be.
course not.
Right. And
because of the Budapest referendum.
right. And
We would respect it. We said we would defend the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
right. And neither NATO nor the US, I don't think it's in their best interest to allow for Russia to come out of this with pretty much anything. And I think it would actually make NATO look weaker.
Yes.
And I'm concerned. I'm actually starting to get a little bit more concerned about the North Atlantic Alliance.
But
It's
did you, so may I ask, can I ask how you voted? I won't, if you don't want to, I won't.
as far as I'm a Republican. I voted Republican mostly overall.
So if you suspected this was going to happen, how could you justify that? If Trump made it clear, he made his goals very clear, how could you vote thinking that it was going to turn out okay with him in office?
Well, actually, I'm disappointed that they've actually, personally, I think that the war was engineered to begin with. I'm still working on that theory a little bit, but I think there's some indicators that there was enough going on there that both sides knew what Russia's most likely courses of action were going to be. They
Sure.
anticipated. I think they kept trying to push it a little bit anyway. Um,
No, but
the,
you're
s-
right. I agree. There
now
was an orchestration of a Russian invasion, I think. There was, yeah.
the slow walking of aid by both the U.S. and NATO to
Yeah.
Ukraine was not up for discussion at all.
Yeah, and
Um,
not even for 3 years, for 11 years, Ukraine was under attack. We should have delivered lethal aid to Ukraine in 2014. We should have put a coalition of NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine. Maybe not in Crimea, but just, "Oh, we're doing training missions here. We're here."
well, they're
Okay.
in. Somebody somewhere should have stood up strong and made things clear to Putin. But I digress. It occurred just America went into Iraq, and I didn't agree with it at the time. I went in with my brothers and sisters to go into Iraq to try to help the Iraqi people and help, hopefully, bring my American brothers and sisters back home alive. With Russia, Ukraine, I don't have to worry about that as much. However, going to your question about voting Republican, it's not just being Republican or conservative a little bit, but it's also being realist. And I actually, although I agree with the US and NATO overall strategic strategies and messages and goals and missions, I overall slightly disagree with an international system in some of the alliances and the way they're scheduled and everything, the United Nations, NATO and everything. NATO had the power, in my opinion, to potentially prevent this in the first place. I think
Yes.
that I think that there was 4 years of Biden where there was just too much feet dragging. There was too much of a weird issue with Hunter being over there with Burisma in a penthouse in a five-star hotel, railing lines off of escorts, butts,
All
and things.
corruption. Full corruption. Hunter Biden is a low life. Abso-freaking-lutely. But that doesn't surprise me. To me, Hunter Biden was a distraction. Hunter Biden was a distraction from the whole EPSTEIN thing. Because
Oh,
Trump had, because Trump's ties are still there. Trump's ties are strongly there. So people just, well, look at Hunter Biden. He's a douche. Yeah. Every single politician has at least one child that's a total complete scumbag who is a waste of oxygen. I mean, God,
this is the sad part of it is even if you're an intelligence analyst or you're an anti-money laundering analyst, I've been both. You've been aware the last 15 years that there is this level of corruption in both Russia, Ukraine, throughout Eastern Europe, and throughout the world for the most part. A lot of the governments, in many cases, are actually playing both sides of conflicts. China's
yes,
doing it in Southeast Asia. Russia's
sure.
doing it in a couple places. America's doing it in a couple places. And this whole thing with Ukraine comes out. And okay, you're talking about a sovereign nation and sovereign people. This is why I believe in realism. Realists say that this is our nation. And yeah, we're part of the United Nations. We're going to try to abide by your overall international system and rules, but we choose our own sovereignty. We choose what we're going to do. And I don't think Putin or Zelensky or whoever else Trump or whoever would, even if it was Harris, whoever, I don't think anybody should be trying to decide Ukrainians' fate without the Ukrainians strongly at the table and represented. And I don't think that we should be playing geopolitical godlike shapeshifter and geopolitics shifter in countries, especially the size of and sovereignty of Ukraine.
But if you are talking about realism, really being realistic,
Yeah,
how on earth is Trump the realistic choice?
he's going to be. This is it. You're calling on me to almost be an apologetic, and it's not.
No, no, I just like you are an intelligent person. You've honorably served your country. You have great arguments. It's just I am trying to understand the logic of why someone would go that direction, knowing that way beyond that is chaos. Beyond that is a world where Russia and China can get more dominance. And
Well,
how can you choose that path?
I didn't see this coming though. Um,
How?
this no, I'm not saying what I'm about to tell you. I didn't see this coming. I
Right.
didn't see Trump siding with Russia as much in what I've heard other people describe as a pivot towards Russia a little bit and opposing China as much. So what I'm hearing some echoes in from the communities that I've formerly worked in is I don't believe that China is that much of a threat, but they think it is. I've heard some people in marine intelligence say, absolutely, we are going to war with China by 2028 or so. And I don't see it happening. Somewhere, somebody up there at their level is gearing even the military intelligence mindset in this direction, which kind of makes me concerned. And if we're seeing the president, which I can actually see him shifting a little bit more towards Putin and Russia to try to get them to be placated. But no matter what Russia comes up with at the table, their international political economy is now diminished. America and its national security strategy is prevailing for the most part in the greater Middle East peace type stuff. Assad is out of Syria. North Africa is still in chaos. We all knew that Trump is an agent of provocation and chaos to begin with. And this is part of my out of order, out of chaos theory. Yes, the richer people, I think, for the most part in America, are going to benefit the most from some of,
But we will not.
but we will not.
But we will not. Again, what was that?
I said, like, we will. I think the global north and the global south are going to have more disparity. And I think it's going to be seen and felt a little bit more in America. However, we said with,
But you still didn't give me a reason why you thought Trump was going to go the right direction. I mean, Trump praised Putin left and right, said Putin was right. He said that he would have the war over in a day because he would negotiate with Putin. So he was laying it on the table, and you're saying he was saying it was going to happen, and you're saying you didn't see it coming.
oh, no, not that part.
Like, swear to
Some of that part I could see coming, but Trump said he was going to be tougher on Putin. So he needs to get there. So that's just so far a little bit of a disappointment. Trump saying things like 4%, saying things like he's a dictator, with Zelensky saying
he
things.
did that before. Trump did all of this before. He has always lied. He has always spread untruth.
Well,
So if you look at what he did in the past, pretty much on his knees, mouth open for whatever Putin has to offer, and then okay, then he's no longer president, and he's just praising him left and right. But he says, "Oh, I'll be tough on Putin." I mean, you're in intel. Clearly, when someone's BSing, you look at their
well,
overall behavior and then the promises, and you go, "Okay, no."
but here's the problem. Here's one of the problems I think is that I think by and large, Trump is actually partially a diversion and distraction himself because even as the president, he's an individual. He's one man. We still have Congress and everything else. So when a Republican votes, and I'm not agreeing with, say, MAGA, that's just being of Trump, or the left side that's almost presidential worship of Biden or Harris. But when I think a Republican votes, they're voting more on mostly more domestic issues. And the Republican stance is a little bit more conservative and realist and stop in with the foreign interventions. Let's try to make a quick cessation of the conflict. Let's get our resources, whatever. And I'm glad nobody put U.S. troops over there, but there's too much of our money going over there. Even if Preston Stewart says that we can account for that, we, the Department of Defense is still making billions of dollars of audit errors all the time. So somebody put in the comments that they thought I was hoping that order out of chaos would be positive. It can be positive for the elites. But what I want to try to draw everybody's attention to is that order out of chaos, no matter who is the president, it may seem one president or another, there's less chaos. I'm not really seeing it. With Trump, I think there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of misinformation, and I have to deal with that as a moderate who agrees a little bit more with the more domestic agendas and the more
You're saying like your argument is that you didn't vote for Trump, you voted for his policies. That's what you voted for, right?
no,
That's pretty much the in short. It's not him, his policies, right?
partially. And to be honest with you, while there's a lot of people, and I'm going to probably really get slain on this comment, but there's a lot of people that were going nuts over Project 2025, and Trump was trying to distance himself from it. So far from what I've seen, most of his words and rhetoric and actions are at least, and there's multiple news articles on this, by the way, as well. There's probably going to be peer reviewed stuff on it shortly. He's roughly over 70% aligned with it. And in some cases, he's even beyond that. But from a Republican and conservative perspective, reading most of what I see in Project 2025, to be honest with you, I'm agreeable with much of it.
With a lot of Project 2025.
Right.
Well, okay. The cutting veterans benefits, because
Well,
I've poured over cutting veteran benefits, reevaluating disability, reevaluating overtime. So, like, I mean, that's, hey, this person's going to stab me in the foot. I'm going to go shoot both feet before he could do that. That's what it sounds like. You're
well,
going to stab my feet. I'm not going to have any feet. Boom.
those are,
Take that, liberals.
yeah, those are,
And here's the thing. You said Trump is just one man. It always starts with one man. Stalin was one man. The H guy was one man. Mussolini. Oh, hold on. Sorry. So yeah, Stalin was one man. Mussolini was one man. And now we have Trump with low-life dirtbag Elon Musk in the Oval Office playing with his kid as his dad's, as his kid's humiliating Trump. And then you're seeing his appointees. You're seeing Trump's appointees. You're seeing he's dismissing people, distinguished people, and putting incompetent morons, Pete Hegseth. So it doesn't matter that he's one man. If he's one man with a bunch of sycophants and positions of power around him, he can take over a lot. Now, okay, I'm sorry. Tell me about Pete Hegseth. Maybe there's something I don't know about him. Maybe he's not an incompetent moron. I may be wrong. Please inform me.
no, Pete Hegseth wouldn't have been our first choice. I can't, it was one of the former Marine commandants, I think. I was talking to that intel guy about him. But here's the thing about Trump currently and the Project 2025 that everybody's just going to have to recognize and deal with is that he is going to absolutely surround himself by the loyalists. And that's why he did pick people like this. And Pete Hegseth, JD Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, and the rest are going to toe the line. And
Yeah.
they're in a position of organizational leadership.
But is Hegseth qualified? Is he qualified to be the Secretary of Defense? I want a very simple yes or no. In your heart, do you think he's qualified to lead the Department of Defense?
To be honest with you, I think he is. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to bat fully for him on this, but, and I'm going to give you my answer from a perspective of business in America. And this goes to my transnational elite theory as well. I've been working in a Fortune 500 bank for a while. I just retired. I'm military veteran and disabled, so I don't agree with that part of Project 2025. But I have seen some of the most talentless hacks be CEOs or chief compliance officers or chief financial officers, et cetera.
Sure.
And it's not what they know or what their background is, it's who they know. And to be honest with you, I think, and I'm not taking a shot at the military in general or officers or anybody, Preston Stewart, or anybody else, because he's a West Point graduate, but I've heard from West Point graduates that West Point to this day is still currently 25 to 30% legacy. And once you get past West Point, That's your gateway. And I've seen this on the intelligence side as well. I've seen people, they're not stupid. They're not necessarily bad, but
What does this have to do with the Department of Defense, though? Was because oh god, I can't remember any of their names. But the guy before Pete Hegseth and the man before him, were they unqualified hacks?
well,
Were
no,
they
not,
legacy unqualified hacks?
I won't go as far as to say all that, but what I'm saying is at that level, I don't think that Pete Hegseth needs to be a rocket science. He needs to be an organizational leader. Somebody, first of all, he's going to have a lot of people fighting him, but he's going to need to circle his wagons with the right people and get under the right wings and
There's
have,
what he has to do and what he can do. Can he do that? Do you think he has the acumen to get those wagons and to be an organizational leader?
well, here's the beauty of it. As America is not engaged in currently directly in a forever war in Iraq or Afghanistan, he may have some space, some lift to give him,
May have this space.
may.
May have space. You don't want maybe in a position of power. You want
Well,
a guy. Don't I mean I'm not in the military, but don't you want a guy who can handle anything, who's ready? I'm not being the leader of the being the head of the department, being the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense. There shouldn't be a learning curve where well maybe he'll rise to the occasion. It's no, you put someone else with a similar level of experience where
well,
he's at the occasion. You don't hope he rises.
well, Pete can be the cream that rises to the top. And some of those people at the top have been the entrenched sycophants that have been in a revolving door between the Department of Defense and Raytheon and Lockheed and
There are
stuff.
people you work with. There are people you work with, and then there's the guys in charge. So, the why can't I remember the previous whoever the previous Secretary of Defense is? Do you
Miley.
think he was more qualified than what was his name?
Wasn't it General Miley?
Oh, okay, it was Miley.
Oh,
Oh,
well,
all right.
well,
So,
he was Joint Chiefs of Staff.
yeah, Austin, Lloyd Austin.
Austin. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Thank you, Bliss. Bliss gave the answer. So, was
right.
Lloyd Austin? Was he kind of? Did he just know how to toe the party line, or is he someone who could have risen to the occasion in a time of war?
Well, I do think that previous SecDef Lloyd Austin did rise to the occasion a few times, but I will say that there's a lot of people a little bit more right of center that talk a lot about Lloyd being part of that good old
Okay,
boys club. So
okay.
well, he rose through the ranks and he has the qualifications and he got the nomination. I believe, and this is the same thing that I've said with, damn, I can't think of her name right now, the former director of ODNI. I had no problem with her. I thought she was great. However, her not being in ODNI and Tulsi Gabbard being in ODNI is not a big deal. The former ODNI director, somebody help me out here. I've been reading books and books about.
Yeah, I've forgotten so much basic stuff just because I've been just reading old history things, especially with NATO and Ukraine. Yeah.
There's Clapper, no, director. Oh my God, they're not giving me. It's Tulsi Gabbard just replaced. I'm looking
Do you
for.
think Tulsi Gabbard? Do you think Tulsi Gabbard is a credible appointee?
Yeah, I do. We're pretty.
Why?
She
The right loves her for some reason. Tell me why.
Well, actually, I don't. I think there's some people on the right that really question her. First of all,
Obviously, because she flipped Democrat to Republican, visited Assad, said Assad is not the enemy. Is another. How do you appoint someone like that into such a position of power?
well, I don't agree with all that. I think that's a pretty simplistic take because she went out there.
Educate me, please.
Well, first of all, she wanted to understand if we were going to engage in more covert activity in Syria, similar to the way we did in Libya, because,
Okay.
you know, Hillary Clinton and Obama and their administration convinced the United Nations to pass a resolution, I believe it's 1973, that basically allowed the NATO for the first time ever to conduct offensive strike in Libya. And not only that, Saudi Arabia and Qatar also helped. And
Mm.
they actually ended up accidentally unaliving civilians there. NATO actually caused civilian deaths in Libya.
Okay.
And they 100% wanted decapitation regime change with Gaddafi in Libya. That man, they said, we got to basically assassinate him. They wanted to try to do the same in Syria. And at the time, starting in about 2008, some of the intelligence reports that I were reading, that they weren't classified, but this is a lot of open source news that suggested that Hillary Clinton and others actually wanted a little bit more moderation in Syria because they were actually going to build a pipeline through Syria, I believe, from going from the Caucasus or somewhere else through Iraq and then through
That
Syria.
makes sense.
So there's some of that, but Tulsi Gabbard, she wasn't pro Assad. What she said was she was
He's not the enemy.
she was saying she was if she said those words, I'm not sure if she's correct about that, but she had different strings being pulled on her. What the main takeaway from her was on Assad specifically was she said, if we oust Assad, what is going to occur in Syria is that a radical ISIS or Al Qaeda type element is going to take over. And that's exactly what happened. Now I'll tell you, the CIA and State Department plays the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And I think they're
Yes.
trying to do the same overall on the devil's chessboard globally.
Mm.
Specifically regarding Putin, I don't think she's a Putin fanboy either. I think she is just strongly anti-US interventionist because she was an enlisted soldier first in Iraq that served in Iraq. So she saw the horrors of war and she comes back, she becomes a Mustang, becomes an officer. There's not, if there was an allegiance type of issue with her, she wouldn't have a TSSCI clearance and be promoted all the way up to lieutenant colonel. But I do see people on the right kind of bashing her a little bit too. So she's getting it kind of from both sides, I think.
So why is she getting bashed by the right?
I
Because
think
she's echoing Russian talking points. That's a clear one.
that's what some people on the right are talking about as well. Yeah.
Okay. Or just she flipped her allegiance from Democrat to Republican. Why do you think she flipped her allegiance? Why did she flip?
One, and that's one I can't
Someone
live
who
with.
could be bought. That is someone who could be bought. That's
I'm
what
not
it is.
sure. I mean, well, I'd have
Because
to
you
find
learned. Because you learned. Probably she served. You have a positive predisposition towards her. So the normal gears of logic just they don't work when it comes to someone we. I used to love Trump.
right.
I used to love Trump. I thought Trump was like a freaking man. And I didn't believe a lot of the things that he was even saying with his own mouth. And I was like, he didn't mean that. Oh, he didn't mean that. But then when he started just going off in 2016, I was like, oh my God. Oh my. The evidence became so overwhelming. And it kind of broke.
Yeah.
It really broke me when I realized what Trump was. Because my dad used to work for Trump.
Oh, wow.
My dad, yeah, my dad loved Trump because Trump kept screwing over the contractors. And my father thought it was a game. Trump has a history. Trump has a history of screwing over contractors. I've met contractors who've worked for him.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, he paid me, but he didn't pay these other guys because he didn't allow they talked.
Yeah. I can see you doing that. And
yeah, exactly. All right.
To be honest with you,
Oh,
I've never liked.
But you these people, so you give them this benefit, this unreasonable benefit of the doubt. When like with Trump, the writing's clearly on the wall. With Gabbard, to me, it's clearly on the wall. But
no, it's more complicated than that. And you're biased too.
I'm sure I'm biased against anyone who BSs. I am biased against anyone who lies and who says the untruth, swears that they are telling the truth, and then admits much later, yeah, I lied anyway, but let's do this. So it's like, I am biased against that. Sure, 100%. If there is a fact, an indisputable fact, and you're saying that's not a fact, it's okay. Anyone who shows me this fact, that's a bad person. I'm biased against that. I am biased against 100%.
Okay. So let me tell you, let me start off counterpoint. I've personally never liked Trump, but the difference for me is Trump. I've always disliked Biden. There's a bunch of things about Biden I dislike. So there's a difference.
I didn't Biden either.
Yeah,
I didn't like Biden. I didn't like Harris, but they were like a healthy alternative to like what we're facing now. Go ahead. I cut you off.
Well, with Tulsi, I would have to see where the money's coming from. If she's talking about the global elites, and yeah, I would have to see some pretty strong evidence that there was some sort of money or other benefit of her switching from Democrat to Republican. Didn't Donald Trump do the same thing? Wasn't he independent or something before?
Yeah, that's another reason. That's another reason he flipped.
Well,
Really a Republican?
well, the problem for me with Donald Trump is and MAGA folks are going to hate me for saying this, but I personally don't think he's that much of a religious Christian type that he tries to throw off. I
No. How many
well,
countless abortions has he paid for? Not just that, like he hosted Miss Teen USA, bragged about walking in on 15-year-old girls, 17-year-old girls changing in the locker rooms. I mean, freaking duh.
well, they train them to be young. They start them off young.
Yeah. That's
Ultimately,
awful. That's awful. That's why I'm like, oh, keep that scum away from power.
you actually just touched on something with, I won't say transnational elites, but kind of some socialites that I've actually met, because I've actually met some millionaires and such. And I don't know if you knew this, but one of the things I was trying to do previously in another life, about starting about 10 years ago up to about 2 years ago, I was trying to do photography as a side hustle, doing
Nice.
portrait photography, mostly like corporate headshots, fashion, stuff like that. Well,
Yeah.
there was a group out here of mostly very wealthy families that had teens, and they started a magazine that they called Texas Teen something or other.
Yeah.
And they got a bunch of regional photographers about once a month to do photo shoots, mostly, I'd say, like editorial fashion.
Okay.
And I also, doing all this, I ended up rubbing elbows with a lot of full-time professional photographers, makeup artists, wardrobe type personnel, and other adult models. And I've actually met a couple of the models that were adults that didn't agree with this. And they eventually shut it down, but it was shut down after most of these teens were over
Mhm.
18. So we were photographing most of these teens when they were like 16 or 17, like juniors and seniors in high school. And everything was pretty tame, but there was still something about it, that just that whole socialite mentality. And then the adult models would tell me, by the way, some of these are actually probably doing a little bit more, just to
Yeah.
let you know, they start them off young.
Yeah. So again, there you go. There you go. And you have the president who helped spread it nationwide. And you think that's a better choice. You think that's a better choice. That's what I'm trying to understand. It's like
Well,
there's this long history of just, hey, this is awful. Hey, this is awful. Hey, this is awful. Is it better to have that than a Democrat in office?
this was the interesting thing, is when what blows my mind even more is when you have all that, and some of the, say, criminal charges are actually, at least some of them are mostly politically engineered.
Left. Oh,
And,
sorry. Left.
and you, he actually beats your candidate. What is that saying about that whole platform and agenda?
Well, what does it say about the American people that he beat that? What
That's
does it
an
say about the poor education, the easy manipulation, the lack of true morality, and the hypocritical fake Christianity of the American people?
This is something that we can strike a chord on, because I've talked about this a little bit. When they actually vilified Trump, in a lot of ways, it actually solidified the right more, because maybe they forgot, I don't know, about the 1990s era Biden, partial, at least, a main
With Anita
contributor
Health?
to the crime bill. And you have a whole generations of people that we have the most imprisoned society on the planet. And it's a criminal justice issue. It's a demand reduction issue. It's a vice issue. We have all kinds of corn out there, like hardcore, crazy psycho corn. So we have a
Yeah.
lot of vice in America. And a lot of people in America actually started identifying with Trump, and they literally, Geohussar, they made the t-shirts and the caps. I voted for Dylan.
Yeah. So now that's something we can strike a chord on. I think there has been a moral degradation of our society. And it's been, I don't know how long it's been. I mean, I've noticed it in my lifetime from growing up to getting older. But what I do think that does help, it's not the main contributor, but what does help contribute to this moral degradation is when you have the paragons of supposed honor and
Yeah.
fidelity and
Yeah.
faith, the churches
Yeah.
that say nothing, that promote it, that push it. And who does the church gravitate most towards?
Right.
Yeah. Now, but the thing is, so you have the churches, low life evil scum, a lot of them, but then you have Hollywood,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's a cesspool of evil too. It's like,
Absolutely.
oh, you have Hollywood, where you have Hollywood, and then you have the decrepit churches of all faiths. They're doing the same. They're doing the same thing, even though Hollywood, like even though the church is like, oh, we are holy in this, except for the children that are constantly taken advantage of, and it's like it's almost like they're both sides of the same coin.
And it's not
And
just America and
oh yeah,
Christianity, but it's all over the world. Islam
yeah,
with the Al
yes,
Qaeda, one of the Al Qaeda training manuals or manuscripts, whatever you want to call it, among their first pages was the words in Arabic: "Control the masses first through religion." And
yeah.
even going back before that, who was it? Was it Lenin that said religion is the opiate of the masses?
Was it Darwin?
It was one
Someone clever,
Darwin or
someone
Marx.
smarter than me said it. Who?
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's where
Marx stole it from Darwin. I know that.
yeah, so I believe in God, but I am not religiously dogmatic. And I think
Yeah,
it's when we get into the dogma that you see from going back to my order out of chaos, transnational elites and how
yeah,
they
yeah.
engineer all this type of stuff, going all the way back to a story in Genesis with the Tower of Babel. They said, look, everybody,
You're
there's,
right. It's Marx. We're right. It's Marx. Sorry, people are saying it's Marx. Go ahead. Tower of Babel.
yeah, so Tower of Babel, you had all these people working together, probably the same type of money or currency or barter system, same language. Everybody's getting along. Everybody's building this tower. They got this shining city or whatever. And the story is God looked down and said, hey, we can't have that. We need to go down there and mess these people up.
So
And
do you think Trump is the bringer down of the Tower of Babel? Because he seems like one of the pillars of it. He seems like a guy who did the deal on the cement, put up the pillars. Again, Miss Teen USA, grab him by this. Not really a respect. Several divorces, I mean, cheated on his wife. He's a pillar. He's
I
part of
know
the foundations of it.
I don't know if he's a pillar of, if he's a pillar, which Babel is he a pillar of? Or if she is,
He's definitely on the pillar of if my daughter weren't my daughter, I'd be dating her. That's his pillar. Oh, she's the hot piece of ass. That Trump said that. Both.
yeah, weird, totally weird
Not
stuff.
just weird, disgusting. That's the pillar of the Tower of Babel. I got
Here's
3 daughters. Would never say it.
Yeah, here's the thing I'll say, and I've made this prediction before they had their first debate between Trump and Biden. And then after Trump got his ear clipped a little bit, I said, well, I predict this guy's, I saw Biden's popularity declining. I saw Trump's popularity rising. I said, this is going to be hard to beat. I said, I predict this is
Yeah,
your next
yeah.
president. But what I'll say is like back then, I said, Biden needs a clear victory in Ukraine or peace, some sort of peace goal. He needs to have some goalposts, et cetera. He needs some kind of resolution to start forming up in the Middle East. He needs at least the appearance of an uptick in the economy, and he needs a meaningful conviction in meaning prison time for Trump. If he doesn't get one or two of those, I don't see him winning right now. And then what happened was Trump got shot, Biden stepped down, and I was just like, after that, I was like, well, how is Harris getting so popular? Anyway, what I'll say with Trump is nearly the same kind of prediction. Trump needs to make an economic impact that people will be able to see and feel here in America in the next couple of years because he's only got
The
about
wealthy will. The
now.
wealthy will, and not just that, but pundits will say, all Trump has to do is get the pundits to say, everything's great. We've never had it so good. And the Trump cultists will say, yep, yes, that's
Absolutely.
why.
MAGA will. Absolutely.
And again, how was he your and when I talk to the intel guy, because I will, I'm just gonna keep asking, how
Has
on earth is it in your mind that was the right choice? We have people doing the salute now frequently.
oh, that's bullshit too.
No, it ain't.
Well,
Come on.
no,
How
no,
is it BS?
no, I'm saying Elon Musk doing that is if you're talking about Elon Musk,
Yeah.
that was totally not just
Yeah.
the fact that he did it, but the response from the criticism of it
Oh,
was, "What are you talking about?" And this is something that
yeah.
I have a
The fact that the
divergent.
AFD was like Elon Musk is supporting the AFD.
Well, this is where I have
Sorry.
another divergence with MAGA, and the MAGA types are just this is one of the problems with the fracturing of the whole conservative right is
Yeah.
that is and it's partially some of these MAGA guys that said it's presidential worship and he'll marry anybody he appoints can't do anything wrong. I could say, oh, Tulsi Gabbard may not be the strongest, but she's okay. Pete Hegseth may not be the strongest, but he's got some time and space for lift. He's going to have to adapt, but Trump is going to have.
Jesus. I just can't believe you're the Department of Defense. Well, let's just see what he does. Let's see how he does.
Oh,
Promotion Colonel,
we're talking about a
Department
history.
of Defense.
We're talking about a history of the United States with its defense fumbling in Korea, Vietnam,
Yes.
the
Yes.
Pentagon Papers. We could go on.
Yes.
So we can't
Fair.
fix one man too much, right?
Right. You know what? You got me there. You got me there because we have you absolutely we've had these professionals for decades and we still screwed up horrendously. You're right.
Much more.
You got me. Yeah, you know what? You got it. That's true. That's true.
Well, I mean, it's true. I'm not saying, I mean, there's definitely, I've personally met 1 and 2 star generals and admirals. And I think at that level, they're still pretty honest. They've got a lot of integrity. The ones that I used to brief, salt of the earth human beings, great, very smart. There's something that happens, and this is the same thing that happens in the FBI and these other places that get too bureaucratic. Once you get to a certain level, it's at that level that they get too much into the careerist mode and they're going to retire from the military. Then they're going to go to Lockheed, Raytheon, General Dynamics, or whatever, or KBR, Halliburton. And the next thing you know, they're going to be somewhere in SecDef. Same thing with ODNI. That girl's going to move from the ODNI directorate into some type of contract with, it's going to be another defense intelligence type contractor with a think tank. And she's probably going to get political. It's just a shell game or a revolving door. And the US government has sufficient continuity in place that, to be honest with you, Geohussar, about 50+% of the stuff that I hear from Trump, I just completely disregard.
Did you disregard 50% of Biden's words or Obama's words, or you disregarded the same thing?
Yeah.
So just
Here's,
all
here's with,
theater.
yeah. Here's with Obama. Let me tell people about Obama really quick because he was, talk to you about Obama really quick. And I thought he was a strong president at first, and had some good points. But I was in Gitmo at the time, and I remember him the day he came in signing all those executive orders, and one of them was to shut down Gitmo.
Yeah.
And we knew, first of all, I knew Obama was going to be president months before he became president because he was flying around with SecDef Bill Gates in an Osprey in Jordan months before. I was like, look, man, who does this with the Department of Defense that's a presidential candidate? I said, here's your next president, Obama.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
he comes in. I said, Obama's your next president. As soon as he starts signing executive orders, there was a couple of them I was okay with. I would have been okay if he could have shut down Gitmo, but they can't shut it down now. They still can't shut it down. They're actually going to build it up. That's on a different side of the island than where the Gitmo detainees were, that they're gonna have the migrants. But we knew that Obama could not shut down Gitmo. There was no solution. He was going to try to make it a prison in, I think, Michigan.
Yeah.
There was no way that was going to happen. And I can talk about the reasons why, but all of these presidents, George Bush came in, I knew Iraqi freedom was a lie.
Sure. Well, but the thing is, and when Trump came in second time, I'm sure you realize Insurrection 2.0 is coming.
Well, we thought so. And I know from
It's
some
just
other,
been a month. It's just
Well,
been a month.
yeah, there's
What if he's just picking out people who will support him when he tries to do an actual, maybe not a murdering purge, but some kind of purge?
well, I don't think it's gonna get that crazy, but I will
Do you
say,
think January 6th would ever happen under a first Trump presidency? No. So what makes you think we can predict what he's going to do? We just
well
know what he's done when he didn't get his way.
well, again, he's just one person, and, although he's influential with his
Dictators
diehards.
are always one person.
Yeah,
Dictators are always one person. They
yeah, but
always, the lies of a dictatorship is always one person. That's not the defense.
those people like Stalin and Hitler were under a completely different system too, though, right? Or can I say even his name on this without TikTok dying on
Yeah,
me?
I don't even say the guy's name because that's okay. Stalin was under a communist system, right?
Well,
Fascist
it
communism.
was
All right,
already
but
authoritarian.
it was already authoritarian. But Weimar Germany was not authoritarian. Weimar Germany was pretty neutral. Weimar Germany was more open market. But
Yeah.
because the people were so demoralized, they chose him.
Right. Well, there's another political underpinning going on as well, because they used some secret society stuff with the Thule Society and stuff. They commandeered a quasi Masonic Thule Society that was just about fraternity at first, and its newsletter wasn't really getting any traction. And the second they started making that more hardline nationalist, it started picking up, and they outlawed Masonry and kicked the originator of the Thule Society out of Germany. So there
Okay,
was a bit of a swing,
sure.
but
But the thing is, either way, there was fertile soil in Germany, and I think we're seeing there's fertile soil here now. There is
well,
fertile soil for that.
I don't think there's going to be a civil war or
No,
insurrection 2.0. What I've predicted
wait,
previously,
wait, but okay, okay.
what I've predicted previously is I think the soil is fertile for a potential Red Terror versus White Terror, Spain 1935 type thing, where you're going to see people still keep going into their political silos more and more. And when they go out in the public, they're going to act out potentially and start having what we called SKTs or small kill teams. I see that potentially
I,
happening.
I see that happening on the red side here. I mean, we have Trump who's gaining more power. He's backed by Elon Musk. Anyone who disagrees with Trump, Musk is threatening in all kinds of ways. He'll probably just start little forced primaries on the members of Congress who disagree with him. And if Trump has enough people supporting him in high positions of the armed forces, what is to stop him?
Well, the people in position in high levels of, especially the military, are going to be a real challenge. But he does have a strong base in the military.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, it's
It's
the thing is with Biden doing a purge, the chances of that zero. He wouldn't have had the support to do that. Thank goodness. Kamala, same thing. Obama, maybe.
Well,
Bush, Bush.
I still think that there's people in the shadows that kind of pull some strings too. I think Trump is a, he as bad as he is for a lot of people. I think he's still just a figurehead, and I'm not trying to be an apologist for him. Like I said, I mean, I voted Republican, but my big thing is I don't legacy wealth, heir, multimillionaires or billionaires,
Trump
multimillionaires.
is legacy wealth.
That's what I'm saying. I don't like any of those guys. I don't like career politicians. And I don't think that it's best to have these type of people as president that have strong links to the mafia, of which I can point to almost all of our presidents.
Now, Biden definitely was a career politician, but
Yes.
he managed to get a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed, something that Trump couldn't do, Obama couldn't do it, and George Bush Jr. couldn't do the same thing.
I think
So,
so.
so Biden's career politician actually worked with him because he actually got Republicans to agree.
And was the socioeconomic and geopolitic climate within America ripe at that time. And he just happened to be the right guy at the
You mean ripe
time.
for what? Ripe for what?
Were all of the basically key elements and factors enabled to be put the pieces of the puzzle together at that right time and place, and he just happened to be there.
See, that's interesting. That's to me, that just sounds like bias, a negative bias. Like, well, I don't like Biden, so I'm going to discredit what happened under his administration. There were Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, and a lot of them were there previously under in the Trump administration.
Mhm.
They were there under Biden.
Well,
There were people who spoke out against Biden,
and they
yet
were
still Biden stuff because Biden was also known as a master negotiator.
and they were there under Obama as well, right? You said?
Yes. Oh no, not all of them were under Obama. Some of them were noobs. Well, actually, no, you're right. The Tea Party movement came in and saw the red wave come in.
Okay.
I mean, so Obama had so much momentum behind him. He had a lot of momentum. He could have gotten a lot done, but he didn't have the savvy to get an infrastructure bill passed.
Well, Obama let me down a little bit post Bin Laden because he
Oh,
basically let John Brennan and the CIA run with that show, and the CIA personnel were saying, "Hey, we just got Obama reelected," because Obama was their man. He was telling the people what the CIA wanted to tell them with the, "Oh no, we're either not torturing them or hey, torture actually does work," and it ended up helping us get Bin Laden. You can actually like, chart everything that they've written and said about Operation Neptune Spear on a even as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, and you can see the
yeah.
disjointedness of the story and determine that probably at least 50% of the US narrative on that is inaccurate.
Yes, sure.
And certainly,
Uh,
John,
so were any of the mistakes actually? I got a question. Were any of the mistakes made, let's say, over the past 20 years, worse than Trump voting against Ukraine, or Trump accusing Ukraine of starting the war, or Trump willing to divvy up Ukraine's resources with Russia?
oh, those are all going to be pretty damning things. And there's not a lot of moderates that I see going to bat for this. There's a lot of people that are on the more hardline MAGA side. They're just like, that wasn't, Elon Musk didn't salute that. Everything that comes out of Trump's mouth is gold. I'm here to,
Yeah.
uh,
But I know, I just want to know what was done worse. The three things I just mentioned, the three things I just mentioned with Trump turning his back on Ukraine, blaming Ukraine for the war, all that. Is there anything equivalent done by the Democrats under Democratic leadership that is equivalent to what Trump did?
I'm still going to have to go back to the crime bill that puts so many people, the socioeconomic impact of that on an entire generation of people, that if you somehow, some way, the rock form of this white powdery substance ended up mystically and magically being inserted in the inner cities.
Yeah.
And if you were found with that, you faced a harsher sentence. But if you were a
Right.
white person in the suburbs
Right.
just doing the powder stuff, you were just going to get a
100%. Right.
slap on the wrist.
100%. And yeah. So it's interesting though, the crime bill happened
Yeah.
and it's unfair, this huge unfair incarceration of mainly minorities. But now I hear a lot of people from both sides of the aisle saying we are too soft on crime and that Soros has funded too many people who are extremely soft on crime. So it's
Soros?
like Soros, George Soros,
Yeah.
he was just funding anyone running for district attorney, Democrats running for district attorney who are very soft on crime, funding them left and right. And so it just seems like, okay, so we're either way too soft on crime in one instance or we're way too hard in another.
That's another interesting point that goes to this whole order out of chaos. It swings, the pendulum swings too radically left or one side or the other. And I
You
think
know,
somebody
we
is
gotta wrap
actually,
this up in a minute. We have to wrap this up in 1 minute. I didn't realize that we've been speaking for about an hour and 40 minutes. It was just this was such a good talk, but we gotta wrap up in like, yeah, about one or 2 minutes. Can you finish your point though?
well, and I make it almost like final thought is that
Yeah.
overall there's US government continuity, and we need to look more at the system level than the individual level. And there's always somebody in the shadows orchestrating the chaos so they can try to engineer that order out of chaos. And it goes not just to it goes to them maintaining control of a population that the Marquis de Sade said their wits crushed. They believed what they were told. And it doesn't matter who the president is in many cases
Yes.
or what the party is, and we can still have moderate political, geopolitical type discussions about all these issues. But I don't see a class war helping people. I don't see too polarized politically of a discussion helping people. what I
Yeah.
want to try to do between, and I see you doing this a lot too. Your posts talk about nothing but facts. And that's where I want to craft my post more and more. Here's the facts, whether you know it or like, and I get a lot of flack from people on the left and right saying, oh, you didn't think, count in this or that. No, here's
Yeah.
the facts. We need to have a pragmatic discussions about how things radically shift, how there's always chaos, how there's always somebody in the shadows benefiting from it, whether it's insider trading or lobbying or a
Yeah.
pandemic or a natural disaster or a prolonged war. And
Yes. Yes.
I'm gonna make that one of my final thoughts.
All right. That this was really good talk. I feel like this is the loudest I've been during a live and it was fun. But I'm glad that we still have a lot we could agree on.
Absolutely.
And everyone, I just want to say, oh, do you have a Patreon or anything, Rebel?
I started one, but I haven't put anything in it yet. So I've got a Patreon and a Substack that's Rebel Intel, and I've got YouTube,
So guys,
Instagram.
follow Rebel Intel on YouTube because that's probably the best monetization. Put up your Patreon, follow him on Patreon. He makes a lot of good content. And again, we don't charge anything for the content, but it does help if we get supported for it. So we keep making more content. So give him a follow. Also, follow me on YouTube. And if you do want to support me, feel free to subscribe on my Patreon. And I'm trying to shift my followers away from TikTok onto YouTube because TikTok keeps cutting my funding. Like, they just cut it again 5 days
Yeah,
ago. So to heck with this app. But
that's
again,
it.
yeah, this is a really good live, Rebel, and I hope to have another discussion with you soon. And I'll eventually, I do want to talk to Intel guy eventually. All right.
Well, I appreciated the invite and being your punching bag for a little while. I don't have as many good answers as that Intel guy does because I'm so moderate that I'm just like, yeah, it's whatever. I voted for him. I voted right, but I don't have. I just there's a lot of the more of the agenda on the other side. I just didn't agree with as much. So that's in general why I do what I do. But on the other hand, like I said, I don't believe there's great change or shift on either side.
Got it. I could see some of that. All right. Take care, and I'll put this up on YouTube in a couple days. All right.
No rush. Thank you very much, Geohussar. Appreciate it.